Do you have a friend who constantly finds herself in relationships where she's treated poorly? What if I told you that chances are her inner critic is running the show, and the voice in her head that's saying some version of "you're not enough" is the reason why it keeps happening? Today, we're going to dive into the neuroscience of the inner critic and how it sabotages social connections. Plus, I'm going to give you 3 research-backed tools to rewire those patterns starting today. Welcome to Happy and Healthy with Amy, the brain health podcast for women in midlife who want to not just survive, but actually thrive during the menopause transition and beyond. I'm Amy Lang, master health coach, best-selling author, and daughter of Alzheimer's, and I'm here to help you make this next chapter of your life the best one yet. Well, hi there. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome back to Happy and Healthy with Amy. Today, we're diving into something that affects every relationship you have, including the most important one, the relationship with yourself. If the voice in your head is saying you're not enough, it's literally rewiring your brain for poor relationships. And here's what's really happening. Every time you listen to that inner critic, you're not just hurting your own feelings, you're actually creating neural pathways that make you more likely to accept poor treatment, to stay in relationships that drain you, and push away the very people who could love you well. This is part 4 of our series on why smart, capable women keep ending up in relationships that don't serve them. We've covered boundary issues, attachment patterns, and emotional vampires. And today, we're exploring the self-worth foundation that affects everything else. So before we dive into the neuroscience, let's clarify some terms that get thrown around quite a bit and sometimes get used interchangeably, but actually mean very different things. To start, let's talk about self-worth. So self-worth is your deeply held feeling about your own value as a person. This is your core belief about whether you're worthy of love, respect, and good treatment. Not because of what you do or achieve, but simply because you exist. And research shows this is broader and more stable than self-esteem. So self-esteem is how you think and feel about yourself in the moment. And it changes based on your mood, circumstances, performance, or whether people approve of you. So it's what researchers call earned value because it's tied to accomplishments and external validation. So you can think of self-worth like the foundation of a house, stable and enduring, whereas self-esteem is like the weather. It changes based on conditions. So when you heal your self-worth, you create a more stable foundation that makes your self-esteem less vulnerable to every storm. So if your inner critic is that harsh voice in your head that judges and criticizes you, saying you're bad, you're wrong, you're inadequate, or you're worthless, it's not just negative thinking. It's like having a cruel roommate in your head who never stops pointing out your flaws. And self-compassion is the antidote, being supportive toward yourself when you're struggling instead of attacking yourself. So now let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain when your self-worth is wounded. Okay, we're not just talking about psychology here. This is neuroscience. So your brain has what's called a default mode network. So think of it as your brain's screensaver. And when you're not actively focused on something else, this network becomes active and starts generating self-referential thoughts. And for most people, this includes some self-reflection. But when you have self-worth issues, this network becomes hijacked by negative self-talk. So people with low self-worth have a hyperactive amygdala. That's your brain's alarm system. And research shows that when your self-worth is wounded, your amygdala goes into overdrive. And it's constantly scanning for threats to your sense of worth. It's like having a smoke detector that goes off every time you make toast. And here's the real problem. Your brain starts seeking evidence that confirms your existing beliefs about yourself. So if deep down inside you believe you're not enough, your brain will notice every time someone seems annoyed with you and completely misses the times they light up when you walk into the room. It's not that the positive feedback isn't there. Your brain is, at best, discounting it, but more likely just filtering it out. So let me give you an example. I had a client, Sarah, who got a performance review with 9 positive comments and 1 suggestion for improvement. Guess which one her brain fixates on? The suggestion. Not because Sarah is dramatic, but because her brain is wired to confirm her underlying belief that she's not good enough. Right? When you engage in self-criticism, it activates the same brain regions as physical pain. And research shows that when you tell yourself, I'm so stupid, or I always mess up, your anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula light up just like they would if someone had physically hurt you. So constant self-criticism keeps you in chronic fight or flight mode. And remember, your nervous system can't distinguish between a real threat and the threat your inner critic creates. So you're walking around with elevated cortisol levels, affecting everything from your sleep to your immune system to your ability to connect with others, to authentically connect with others. But here's the hopeful news. These neural pathways got strong through repetition, and they can be changed the same way. Every time you practice self-criticism, you were literally building those neural highways, which means every time you practice self-compassion, you're building new ones. All right, so let's get specific about how these brain patterns show up in your relationships. There are 3 major patterns that show up consistently. The first pattern is the tolerance trap. So when you don't believe you deserve good treatment at a core level, your nervous system doesn't recognize red flags as actual threats. So remember that hypervigilant amygdala? It is so busy scanning for threats to your worth that it misses threats to your well-being. So you start accepting less than you deserve. And when someone gives you even basic respect or kindness, you feel grateful instead of recognizing it as the bare minimum. Right? This reinforces the cycle. Accepting less leads to feeling grateful for scraps, which lowers your standards even further. And you find yourself saying things like, at least they're not cheating, or at least they remembered my birthday, instead of asking, is this person actually enhancing my life? Do I feel better about myself when I'm with them? Right? Pattern number 2 is the projection magnet. We unconsciously seek relationships that confirm our self-concept. People are like mirrors. So it's not that you're consciously choosing emotionally unavailable people. It's that your brain recognizes them as safe because their behavior matches your internal narrative. So your nervous system mistakes familiar for safe, even when familiar is painful. So if you grew up feeling like you had to earn love, you'll be drawn to people who make you work for their attention because that feels right to your brain. All right? So I want you to pay attention to this. Do you find yourself more attracted to people who are hard to read, who keep you guessing, who make you feel like you have to prove yourself? If so, that's your wounded self-worth seeking confirmation. All right. Pattern number 3 is the overcompensation cycle. So when you don't feel inherently valuable, you try to earn love and acceptance through performance. So you become the person who always says yes, who anticipates everyone's needs, who makes themselves indispensable. Sound like people pleasing, right? But constantly trying to prove your worth depletes your energy for genuine connection. Because you're so busy managing everyone else's emotions and needs that you lose touch with your own. And when your efforts aren't reciprocated, which they often aren't because you're attracting people who are happy to take without giving, remember those emotional vampires, right? Resentment builds. But instead of recognizing this as a relationship problem, more often than not, you blame yourself for not doing enough. So I want you to notice if you find yourself thinking, if I just do X better, fill in that blank, they'll appreciate me. Or if I can just figure out what they need, they'll choose me. Right? You want to feel like you belong. That's your self-worth wound talking, trying to earn what should be freely given. So when your self-worth is wounded, you don't just have bad relationship luck. You have a brain that's literally wired to recreate familiar patterns of not enoughness over and over again. But once you understand this, you can start to change it. All right? So let's talk about the neuroscience of self-compassion versus self-criticism, because this is where we start to see the path forward. So when you engage in self-criticism, your brain responds as if you're under attack. So self-criticism triggers, again, the release of cortisol and other stress hormones, which puts your entire nervous system into defense mode. Right? So self-criticism activates shame, and shame triggers isolation behaviors. So when you feel ashamed, your brain's natural response is to hide, to pull away from others. This pushes away the very support and connection that could help you heal. Now, self-compassion works completely differently in your brain. When you practice self-compassion, you activate what researchers call the care system. And this releases oxytocin and endorphins, right? The same neurochemicals that are involved in bonding, love, and feelings of safety. So self-compassion actually strengthens the connections in your prefrontal cortex, which improves your ability to regulate emotions and make decisions that align with your values rather than your fears. And instead of creating psychological damage, self-compassion builds emotional resilience, your ability to bounce back from setbacks without it destroying your sense of self. So Dr. Kristin Neff, who's done the most extensive research on self-compassion, breaks it down into 3 components: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. So self-kindness means treating yourself with the same gentleness you'd show a good friend. And instead of harsh judgment when you mess up, you offer yourself understanding and care. The key here is changing your internal tone of voice. Second component, common humanity. This is recognizing that struggle, failure, and imperfection are part of the human experience, right? Not evidence that something is uniquely wrong with you. So when you remember that everyone struggles, you stop feeling so isolated in your pain. Third component, mindfulness. This means observing your thoughts and feelings without getting completely swept away by them. So it's the difference between saying, I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough versus I'm not good enough. All right, so right now I want you to try this. Place your hand on your heart. This actually can activate the vagus nerve and help you regulate your nervous system. Now think about something you're struggling with and ask yourself, what would I say to my best friend if she were going through this? That's the voice of self-compassion. So what are some other things you can do? I'm going to give you 3 practical rewiring tools. The first one is the self-compassion break. So when you notice self-criticism, that inner critic, I want you to use this 3-step process. First, pause and acknowledge. This is a moment of suffering. Second, remind yourself suffering is part of the human experience. I'm not alone in this. Third, offer yourself kindness. May I be kind to myself in this moment. Okay, this will interrupt the shame spiral before it can gain momentum, and it activates your brain's care system instead of the threat system. So you're literally creating new neural pathways each time you do this. And I know it might sound hokey or feel hokey, but just try it, okay, for yourself. Tool number 2 is evidence collection. Your brain has been collecting evidence of your not enoughness for years, okay, years. Now we're going to deliberately collect evidence of your worth and value. So I want you to keep a daily log of 3 things. Moments when you showed up with kindness, times when your presence made a difference to someone, and instances when you handled something well. This isn't about achievements. It's about recognizing your inherent value. And this works because it actively weakens the confirmation bias that keeps you focused on negative evidence while strengthening neural pathways that recognize your positive qualities. All right? Tool number 3, the good friend reframe. When your inner critic starts its familiar rant, interrupt it by asking, what would I tell my best friend in this situation? Then say those exact words to yourself. This will move you from the emotional, reactive limbic system to the rational, compassionate prefrontal cortex. You're literally changing which part of your brain is driving the conversation. Right? Tool number 4 is values-based identity. So instead of defining yourself by others' reactions or your achievements, I want you to anchor your identity in your values and character. So instead of saying, I am successful when others approve of me, try, I am someone who shows up with integrity and kindness. Right? So the first makes your worth dependent on external factors, while the second grounds it in who you're choosing to be, and who you choose to be. And research shows it typically takes about 6 to 8 weeks of consistent practice to see significant changes in neural pathways. Right? So your brain is literally rewiring itself, which takes time. But every single practice session matters. All right? So before making major relationship decisions, I want you to run these questions through your mind. You might even want to journal this. Okay? Question number 1. Am I saying yes because I want to, or because I'm afraid of disappointing someone? If fear is driving your decision, I want you to pause. Because healthy relationships don't require you to abandon your own needs to keep someone interested. Okay. Question number 2. Do I feel energized or drained after spending time with this person? Your body knows before your mind does. So if you consistently feel depleted after being with someone, that's information worth paying attention to. We talked about this in the previous episode, right? Question number 3. Am I trying to earn their love, or do I feel naturally accepted? So love isn't something you should have to work for or prove you deserve. If you find yourself constantly trying to convince someone of your value, that's a red flag. That's a big red flag. All right? And then question number 4, would I want my best friend to be treated the way I'm being treated? Sometimes we accept for ourselves what we'd never tolerate seeing someone else we love experience. All right, so here's how you'll know your self-worth is healing. You'll find yourself naturally attracted to people who are emotionally available, consistent, and kind. Not because you've changed your type, but because your nervous system now recognizes healthy love as safe instead of boring. Okay, this goes back to those attachment styles that we talked about 2 episodes ago, right? So, again, your inner critic is literally rewiring your brain for unhealthy relationships. But self-worth isn't fixed. It's not a constant. It's actually a skill you can develop through neuroplasticity. And self-compassion is more effective than self-criticism for creating lasting change. Every time. All right? And twice on Sunday. So healthy relationships become possible when you believe you deserve them. Okay? So this week, practice the self-compassion break at least once daily. And when you notice that inner critic voice, pause and ask yourself, what do I need to hear right now? Then offer yourself those words of kindness. And remember, you don't have to earn love by being perfect. You deserve love because you're human. And that journey begins with healing your relationship with yourself. All right, so I'm going to end today's episode with a quote by Dr. Kristin Neff. With self-compassion, we give ourselves the same kindness and care we'd give to a good friend.